Yeah. So today, we had a really great prompt from one of my athletes. He saw that we wanted to talk about off season and planning for 2023 on today's call. And so he kind of was like, all right, well, I would love to hear from each coach about how 2022 went and what were some of the high points, some of the low points. Um, what are we looking to improve on as athletes going into the next season? And what is a process oriented goal we have for the next season? Unfortunately, we're down 3 coaches today, so we'll hear from them maybe in December when we get kind of in a roundabout way back to these topics. But for today, Drew, Kristen, and myself can touch on that a little bit. And I think, just to what you mentioned about getting down to a warmer climate, that's something that we're thinking about because I think both of us want to do longer races, and that's not easy to train for when you live in Carbondale, because we really can't run on trail at all this time of year. It's not really a thing. Especially if it keeps kind of off and on snowing like it has been. Like I did a trail run, 2 trail runs last week, and it was like so. It just starts to get like a little bit muddy, and it's pretty irresponsible to run on muddy trail. So we're running on the roads, and we've gotten more used to the treadmill. Kind of since last spring. We had a really wet spring last year, and we're just like, you know what, we're going to embrace the treadmill this year. We got memberships to a gym, and I'm like all about that tool, but we're going to try to be more flexible and maybe get down to see you, Kristen, or I don't know. Like, I really don't know. Like, we need to go somewhere where we can get some climbing and some vert in. So I'm not sure if that's where you are.
There's tons of climbing. There's mountains in every direction. Forrest will be down here in the spring, and I'm so psyched to see him. He's one of my athletes, so that'll be really cool to run around. I think he knows the area better than I do.
Oh, that's awesome. Heck yeah. Well, cool. Let's kind of dive into these topics. I'm not sure how long things will take. It could take the full hour or maybe not. I guess, I can start off by talking a little bit about my season, my takeaways, and then, we'll transition over to you, Kristen, and to Drew, and then use that to hopefully inform our discussion about off season, what that kind of looks like, and then, how we might use this time to plan for 2023. I would say like my biggest high point was training for CCC. I think my biggest low point was probably CCC itself, which is really like very polar opposites. I think when I look back on my season, I think like unfortunately, I didn't do a lot of things right that I wish I had in retrospect. But that's kind of the beauty of all of this, is that we get to learn from our past experiences and apply it in the future to hopefully kind of inform the direction and the shape that our running and our training goes. Why did my training for CCC go mostly right? Because I just love running in the mountains. And so that race was like a particularly good match for me, my skill set, and like not even my skills, but like what I like to do, how I like to spend my time. I've always, I've been running for a long time now, but I've always envisioned myself doing longer runs during the week, having that schedule, that flexibility, being able to push high miles with a lot of vert, and CCC like really allowed me to do that, right? Like that was the race that gave me those opportunities, and it necessitated training that way. And that was freaking awesome. The race didn't go that well, Unfortunately, in some, no matter how well our training goes, there's always the uncertainty on race day, and there's nothing that we can really do. We just deal with we play the cards we're dealt, and we go out there and try to make the most of it. And I think, I talked about that on a previous call, so you guys can always go back and refer to exactly how the race went. But yeah, I wasn't feeling very good, gutted it out, finished. And I think, like, more so than the finish, it was just being able to kind of live the life that I wanted to live. But in retrospect, there's a lot of things that I still want to improve on and need to look forward to and to do better. And I love that. That feels like an empowering process to me when I think about the things that I could improve on. It's not something that gets me down. It's something that motivates me. And I've kind of always been like that. That hasn't really been something that I needed to cultivate over time. I've always been very motivated. When I come up short, I kind of like want to get out there and do better the next time. And so when I don't reach a goal, that to me is motivation enough to continue the process. I know that's not the same thing for everybody, but that's just kind of the way that my brain works. And so yeah, I'm looking to, really just kind of improve on the way I approach my A races next year. I feel like I didn't do a good job recognizing how much time and effort and stress there was on the training side of things. And so when work stress, coaching stress was really high during my build for CCC, I didn't do a good job of working with that. I probably did a good job of compartmentalizing and ignoring how stressed I was at work. But unfortunately, that most likely led to a health situation that I've been in for the last 3 months. And so I really need to be more honest with myself about those stresses, whether it means doing a little bit less and not trying to be so regimented with the training, even when I'm enjoying it, because it's often that I have found through coaching and through my own athletic experiences that it's not in the hard weeks that we have issues. It's weeks later that stuff adds up, and all of a sudden we feel the results of the mistakes that we've made. And so, that's something that I really need to improve on. It's something that I mentioned in the CCC recap. It's like, we work 6 days a week as coaches. That's not something that I can sustain long-term when I'm training the way that I want to train for my focused events. It's something that, like, I have to be more upfront with my athletes and with myself. Like, I'm going to need to work 4 to 5 days on those particular weeks. And that's just the way that it's going to be. That's for my mental health. That's for my physical health and well-being. I try to do it all because I've learned a lot about myself that I don't like disappointing my athletes. I find I get a lot of purpose through coaching. I mean, that's why I created this business and do what I do, and I freaking enjoy it. But it's hard for me to rest. It's hard for me to just sit on the couch. And, CCC training, I loved it. I was training 15 to 17 hours a week. That's huge volume. You're doing a 4-hour run and then, working, it's on a weekend, it's not ideal. And I think looking back, like, it's really created, and according to my doctors, it's created the situation that I'm in now where, like, I almost can't train at all, like, unfortunately. And so I really want to work on getting a better handle on that. I think it's been it's an ongoing process. I feel like inspired to do better and to communicate more with my specific roster, my team of athletes, and take the time and the space that I need. Being an athlete, there is a shelf life. Like, I'm only going to be performing as an elite for, so many more years. I need to prioritize that. I hope everybody understands. If you don't, that's okay. But that's the way that it's going to be as I move forward. I'm going to be pretty regimented and very communicative about it. And so really, like, right now, my only process-oriented goal for 2023 is 23 is to get my health back, on my mental health and my physical health. I was just at a point of burnout. I could feel all of these things start to manifest in my physical health. And like it's just been really difficult the last 3 months. Yeah, straight up. So everything rests on having good mental and physical health. That's the idea of well-being. It's not one or the other, it's both things. And so in order to like really do well next year and race well, and to even make it to the start line of like my spring races, I need to be healthier. I need to have better boundaries. I need to work less. I'm sorry if that disappoints any of my athletes. But that's just the way that it goes. We're not machines, we're humans. I try so hard to ignore that and to be the constant supporter and helper. It's just the way that my brain works, and it's gotten me in so much trouble. It's hard to talk about, honestly. But that is my process-oriented goal. I want to be healthier. I know that's going to allow me to be a better coach and to prioritize maybe like the 5 or so years of being really fast that I have left. I really want to prioritize that. All right. I hope, like maybe some of that will inform our discussion later, but that's just kind of where I'm at after the season. And Kristen, Drew, who wants to take a stab at this?
Ooh, hit me.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I think everything that TJ said is so spot on. I think I kind of talked a little bit about the last few years on my end a couple of calls ago, and I think a lot of that stress it compounds. And so this last year, I've spent about 80% of it being injured with a low back injury, and now like a double whammy Achilles issue that, and I think everything is related, which is just fascinating and mind-boggling at the same time. But I think for me, what went really well this year was taking a step back from training and doing what I could and being okay with that. I remember a lot of long runs. I would have to say to myself, this is where I'm at right now, and that's okay. Like this is not permanent. I won't be at this fitness level forever. Just to like keep me from comparing myself to the fitness I had the previous year or 6 months or before the back injury happened. And then as I was training for OCC as part of the UTMB series, we were out in Crested Butte and running uphill a lot, and that was amazing. And so it was just being able to really be grateful for the opportunities that you get to move your body in these beautiful places. And one thing that really helps me that I did is I started a gratitude journal, and I typically do this anyway, but I started a running gratitude journal. So I have like my training log, but then I also have like a paper training log because I'm a psychopath. And in that training log, I would write like the 3 things on my run that I was most grateful for, right? Where it was like this run was pain-free. I found, a bolete that I got to take home and make dinner with. Just like weird things like that were just like really exciting for me. And then one thing that I wish I would have done more of is just the nitty-gritty physical therapy, toe spacers, calf raises, eccentric heel drops. Like I should have been doing those after CCC as well, which kind of tied into my Achilles issue. So I'm doing that now, but that's also part of my process-oriented goal for 2023 is just like keeping up with the little things, because I tell my athletes this all the time too, or it's like, make sure that you're doing the physical therapy that's prescribed by your physical therapist. Make sure you're doing the mountain legs, make sure you're doing the lunge matrix. Like all of these little things actually help reduce the risk of injury. So just make sure I'm taking care of myself in those ways, and prioritizing mental health over anything else. So those are my goals.
Yeah, it's so awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And again, I'll just give a if anybody is just jumping into this conversation and hasn't had an opportunity to kind of hear our previous conversations about working through setbacks, I think it was part one of that conversation about 3 or 4 weeks ago, where Kristen talked about some of her lower back issues and some like familial stuff that was affecting her training. I would encourage you guys to listen to that podcast episode and community call, and just there's some really amazing takeaways from that part of the conversation that I know for Kristen really informed a lot of her the perspectives that she kind of highlighted as high points. The gratitude, being comfortable with where she's at, not comparing to kind of past athletic versions of herself. All of those things are, just freaking awesome. I mean, I will take like a perspective shift like that over like a real tangible physiological adaptation for one of my athletes any day, because those perspectives are like the bedrock of everything. Without those, it's very hard to continue to improve over time, because like as we've talked about over like the last, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 calls, like we've all been doing this for many years. In the majority of the time, we probably have like decades of experience more than the athletes that we coach, and so we've gone through so many challenges, so many setbacks, worked through and have seen different iterations of our athletic selves. And even more so, probably like the people that we actually are, because so much of the running and the training really informs these greater shifts for us as humans, as people. And that's kind of the whole point of this. But I will take like those perspective shifts over anything else. I think when you have done that internal work and you've come to those realizations, you have a better platform for going after your goals. You have so much more perspective, and you're better able to cope with the inevitable challenges that you have. I mean, no journey is linear, right? Like as all of the last few calls we've had really highlights. And the point that we bring all this stuff up is because we want you guys to kind of weather those storms. I like the analogy of like water. Do you want to be the rock, or do you want to be water that kind of just flows and moves through the challenges, takes things with acceptance, and doesn't necessarily say, okay, well, this isn't happening to me, or ignores challenges, but is somebody who kind of embraces those challenges and uses them as, I like to call them, rise up moments, where we get to discover who we really are, and we get to build those perspectives that allow us to then become better people, better athletes later. Kristen, I think it's just so cool to hear and to see all of these amazing shifts that you're having. I know you're dealing with an Achilles thing and being healthy and doing the little things, which is an amazing process-oriented goal. Just doing those small things every day, putting in the PT work, learning maybe from the past where some of those things were ignored. All of that, it's just so key, right? And like such a great example for our athletes. We don't want to let those little things go by the wayside, but it's easy to, especially this time of year when we've been maybe more diligent and given up a lot of mental energy to focusing on the little things while we're doing our big training and working towards big goals. And it's okay to like take a little bit of a step back, but make sure you're still listening to your body. You're building out those habits and those routines. Yeah, Drew.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add one more thing.
Please.
One thing that I've learned lately that like really shocked me was that like our perception of happiness is based off of what we know and not what happiness actually is. This might get a little like, meta or something, but I thought that was really fascinating too, because a lot of times when we do have a setback or an injury, like our human brains instantly just like compare ourselves to our friends on Strava, to our previous, athletic versions of ourselves. But like the definition of happiness isn't, it's not supposed to be compared. It's supposed to be like living in the moment and appreciating what you have at that time period. And so that was like a pretty profound moment for me, because thinking about happiness is like, oh, well, when I lived in Boulder, I was really fast and happy, but it's like, everything that you compare yourself to has already happened. So happiness isn't necessarily that. It's that, like, we usually fall back into routines and into habits, and being vulnerable enough to hold whatever it is loosely and kind of like go into the unknown. Like, I think that has been like the key motivator for me, because like, I know what I can do because I've done it. What I don't know what I can do is like even more exciting, because I haven't quite reached that point yet. So I think keeping that in mind with all of this as well is really has been motivating, because like, I don't know, if you don't put yourself out there, you're never going to know. So
Yeah, totally. And I just hear a lot of like infinite mindset, like thinking when I hear stuff like that. And it's just so key, right? Because like, yeah, we're all athletes, and like maybe you can only be fast for a certain amount of time, and the science there will tell us that. But like, we can still be athletes our whole lives. And so there's always this question of, what's coming next? What kind of challenges will I face? What kind of highs will I get to enjoy? What will I be celebrating? What will I be working through? And just, yeah, like always trying to keep moving forward and going into that unknown, just maybe with some curiosity and vulnerability, like you mentioned there, Kristen. Like, I really like that. And I think that is something that, we try to embrace and validate when we hear that in our athletes, journeys and stories. And I wish, if we had all the time in the world and we had all of the attention of everybody in the community, and we wanted to, if we could do this and to write volumes, we could write volumes on all of, each rad weekend update, each goal accomplished by one of our athletes that we highlight every week. It's so much more than the 4 or 5 sentences that we write. And so much of that is about stepping into the unknown. And there's nothing like a race or a goal that's just out of reach, something that you haven't accomplished before, something that you haven't gone through before, to kind of teach you about having that courage to be vulnerable and to go into an uncertain future. And when we can apply that to life, it's even more profound, because we all experience stuff like that. I know for so many people right now, this is just a hard time to be a person. Financially, it's difficult. There's a lot going on politically that makes things really challenging. So, trying to take some of those lessons and then apply them to life, and really it's hard, but try to embrace that uncertainty. I mean, it's something that I'm doing right now with my health challenges. I started immunotherapy yesterday. And so hopefully in 6 to 12 months, I'll be able to run outside and not feel like crap anymore. I don't know, though. There's no guarantee. That no one gave me a guarantee. No one said it will be 6 months. It'll be 12. It's so you just go and do the best that you can, and you hope to learn something in the process. And I think one of the biggest things, something that I've really learned from you, Kristen, is that, even when it's hard, it's so important to externalize the parts of it that you are grateful for, even externalize the things that are frustrating you or are tough. I think that really helps. And we've talked about that so much in the last few calls. So I would encourage you guys to just go back and to listen to those calls if you hadn't already. Coach Drew, would love to hear about your 2022, and like what went right, what didn't go right, what are you trying to improve on? What are your process-oriented goals?
Yeah, 2022 was a big year for me personally and for my family. So I'm fortunate in that I don't get injured often, knock on wood, right? So I don't have to, TJ and Kristen's thing are awesome, but I'm going to kind of take a little bit of a different tangent here. Let's start with a low point though. I wouldn't call it a point necessarily, but what made 2022 difficult, especially the first half of the year, is just parenting. And I know that a lot of people on the call listening now or maybe listening later may not have kids, so it may not, I guess, resonate with you, but being a parent of little kids is so freaking hard. Like, it's just hard. Not only is it challenging, I guess, just to be a parent, but it's also difficult to, I guess, be the best like parent you can be, to be the best like partner you can be, but also to want to continue with your running and your personal endeavors. And it's taken a lot for me to understand that a lot of those like personal endeavors, at least in this time, in this season right now, are gone. Like, I can't do those anymore because it takes time away from what's more important, my kids and my wife. And so looking at just the beginning of 2022, being stressed, working a full-time job, my wife working a very demanding, very stressful full-time job, us having like a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. If you've had kids, multiple kids, you know that that's like the thick of it, right? And that something had to change. And what had to change was two things. One, I quit my job. We took a big financial hit to make the move over to coaching, because ultimately that's what I'm really passionate about. And I'll touch more on that later when I talk about what went right, because that was a good decision. But in the moment, it was really scary and left us very vulnerable. And it was a really kind of a low point to me where everything else around me was really like, I was hypersensitive to it because of that vulnerability. Another thing that really impacted me because of just all the stress and that big change was just like trying to understand that my routine now is different than my routine has always been. And so knowing that I can't run like I used to, like it used to be like literally every day I run at 7 a.m. or I run at 6 a.m. every day. And if I don't run at 6, I just don't run, because I'm a very like creature of habit type person where I'm set in my routine so deeply where if I'm like barely removed, it just changes. And when you've got kids, that's not possible. Right. And so having to like go back to, well, I can't train. I can run, but I can't train. And there's a difference between running and training. They're not close to being the same thing. And so that was kind of a low point for me, like kind of maybe it doesn't make a ton of sense, but that's kind of where I was coming from. So when it comes to like what went right for 2022, making that big change to move to Microcosm full-time. I say full-time because that's my only job. I don't work like 60 hours a week like I was before, right? But just coaching has given me the opportunity to really spend more time with my family, to really spend a little bit more, well, maybe not more time, but have more flexibility with my running, and ultimately doing what I love most and helping others. I joke with Kristen every now and then because I know that she knows the Enneagram things, but if you do too, like I'm an Enneagram 2, like I am here on this planet to help others because it makes me feel really like awesome. And so everything I've chosen really now the back half of 22 has really helped me as a person and has helped my family. And we're doing really well now. As it pertains to, I guess, this next season, like process-oriented goals and kind of what we're looking at, I'm really, really, really wanting to lean into the time that I have with my family. And that's really important to me. I didn't make these sacrifices so that I could like stop working and just be out in the trails or out on whatever running the whole time, right? I need to be with my family because they are important to me and I love them. Continuing to prioritize that time, I guess, knowing that it's going to take away from my personal endeavors. I don't see myself going out and running like a 67-minute half marathon anymore. But that's okay. It's okay. And understanding that that's okay is good. And then during the pandemic years, I've really like pulled myself away from like the social aspect and got more serious with my running, and I've gotten a lot faster. But at the same time, I've kind of let go of some like relationships that I've really enjoyed and the social aspect that running brings. That's really helpful from like a mental and emotional standpoint. And I think my process-oriented goal for 2023 is to be social again, be a social runner. Like, it's not serious. Like, just relax, let go and run with your friends. It doesn't matter if they're running 8-minute pace or 9-minute pace or 10-minute pace or whatever it is. Like, who cares? Like, get out there, have fun, see people, be social. And I'm really, really, really looking forward to that part of this next year.
Awesome. Yeah, Drew, I just really like your perspective. I don't know, what it's like with your roster or Kristen's, but I coach a lot of athletes who have small kids, and I think they can relate a lot to some of the things that you've had to adjust to as a runner. Obviously it's hard, and there's no one way to work through those challenges. But I wonder if you had advice for somebody who was in a similar situation to you, who was working with one of us coaches and maybe not running the same way they were before, but wondering like how to like really engage in the coaching process, and is it even worth it to have a coach? Like, what would your advice be for them?
No, that's a really, really good question. Because at a time I also felt like, man, if I'm not doing this to like run races, or if I'm not doing this to like run fast, then why am I doing this? And really that's kind of a negative, unhealthy way of thinking that, again, I was very guilty of. I think what is important is talking to your coach and communicating, like, this is how I'm feeling, and I guess looking for maybe a little bit of validation, which I know that the coaches at Microcosm anyway are amazing at providing. But staying with it. Like, you don't just run to race. Like, none of us just run to race. And if you do, your priorities might need realigning. We run because it makes us feel good. It's good for our mental health. It's good for our physical health. And from like a parental aspect of things, I like to run, even if it's just like every now and then, so that my daughter who's 3 and my son who's 1 can see me running, so they understand what it's like to do hard things and to treat your body right. And we tell my daughter Brady, it's time for daddy to go exercise his body to help his body be healthier, and set a really good example for your children. And so like, getting away from coaching, just, I think it helps run the risk of you like falling out of it, right? Like, we need the accountability and we need the programming. Like, you don't want to get hurt. I swear, getting hurt while you've got kids not only makes you less helpful to your partner, but also detracts from your ability to run and maybe have that 1 hour, a few days a week of you time, right? Everyone knows, like, let's be real for a second. I can't take a poop in the morning without my daughter sitting in there being like, good job, daddy. Like, it's just like, you got to stay with it. You got to stick with it, because in the end, it's really, really good for you.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you. I think, gosh, it's so important to recognize, and it's something that I've heard in the things that I mentioned and things that Kristen mentioned and the things that you mentioned, Drew. So we all have different iterations of our athletic lives. Like, sometimes we're sick. Sometimes we are dealing with injury. Sometimes we're adjusting to life as a parent and figuring out what it's like to like no longer run on that like morning routine. Like you mentioned, that was kind of like your bedrock to your training, Drew, or like, we're not running as socially as we used to. And like, I'm recognizing now through time and space, I've begun to recognize that like, I used to really love those social runs. And like, so that's my big goal for next year. It's like, we have these opportunities, and I think it's so important for athletes to recognize like that is really normal to have different iterations of your athletic life. That's not a reason to stop running, to stop engaging with things that you enjoy, things that make you feel good, that are beneficial to your physical and mental well-being. These are just opportunities to maybe hold things a little bit looser, to make adjustments, and to not put those adjustments on a specific timeline, but to realize like those changes have to happen in their own time. They work on their time, not your time, not the time that you think that they're supposed to work on. And when you have a coach in those moments, you have the opportunity to discuss these things, to get feedback on how you're feeling, to have someone mirror back to you the things that you're saying. And so that really helps to maybe check your thought process on all of these things that are super important. And I think just to facilitate the conversation and to move us forward in the direction that we want to go here is to, maybe use this as a lens through which we can talk about off season. Because I know the hardest thing, and I feel this every November, I feel like it's the hardest month of the year for me to train. It gets dark early. It's, windier, it's colder, there's snow. I've kind of exhausted a lot of my mental resources through bigger races earlier in the season and being very diligent with my training and holding a lot of things at the same moment. And that takes a lot of mental energy and focus. And so like this time of year, and I know this is true because I've been coaching for almost 5 years full time, and I've seen this in hundreds and hundreds of athletes that I've gotten to work with. Like this is a hard time of year almost for everybody. And so, that's why we talk about this, like in parentheses, like off season, like it's kind of that time of year we are holding things looser. We've hopefully gone for some of our big goals, and we're thinking about like, really like, how do we keep this fun and joyful? How do we perpetuate the process? And so one of the big things that I like to have my athletes thinking about is like, hey, it's okay if your motivation's not there. It's okay if things are shifting, if priorities are shifting, if, you have given a lot of your time and you sacrifice family time and now you want to lean into more family time or partner time, or you want to, hop on the bike and bike a little bit more. And I think that that's great. And it's okay to respond to those things and make those micro adjustments. And that's why you have a coach. We can help you do that while also staying mindful of the fact that compounding consistency is really important. We don't want to just stop running. I think an off season for most people, if we're going to take time off, is really the least amount of time off that you can take off, probably about a week. I don't like to have athletes take more than a week off because we can do a lot less while still maintaining adaptation. Rather, when we're not training at all, we're not maintaining adaptation. We're actually losing out on maintaining the neuro pathways that we've worked really hard to build that make us efficient runners. So, we really want to put those things in perspective when we're making our decisions about off season. I like to have athletes think about some of the things maybe that Kristen mentioned earlier, like, okay, maybe I haven't been doing my PT as much. All right, well, haven't been doing my PT as much, so I'm running a little bit less now because it just feels better mentally. And that's kind of the phase of training, the cycle of training that most people are in the fall. And so I can use some of that free time to go see my PT finally, to work on some of those nagging injuries, those little niggles, the plantar issues, the Achilles stuff. Maybe I've got some IT stuff left over from the season. I want to work on those things. So I'm going to do a little extra strength work in my spare time. You see, I'm still staying engaged in that athletic identity, those parts of the athletic journey that are important, but maybe I'm not running as much. Maybe things look a little different, but they're still kind of part of the same thing, which is really important, right? And we mentioned this on the past call, if we're going through injury, if we can't run, a great thing to still do to maintain some of that like feel that you're engaging with the process is to like continue with your habits, but just like switch the action. So it's like, okay, I'm still going to go to the gym. I'm going to do my stretching and mobility, but instead of like get on the treadmill, I'm going to go in the sauna. And like, so you switch the action, but you still kind of stay engaged in the routine. I think that's super, super important. The consistency thing, Drew, you had some really great notes there on that. I'm wondering if you wanted to kind of explain your thinking and why like that consistency, even through kind of like an off season, a loose off season, is important.
I completely understand the benefits of maybe taking a little bit of a time off from running. If you're, nearing burnout, it's been a crazy race season. There's just a lot going on this time of year, right? Like TJ pretty much started the call saying, That said, like, I feel like a lot of athletes work so hard to create a really consistent routine of training, only to get through, to the start of the winter where they're like, well, I don't really like running outside in the cold or in the dark or whatever the reason is. And then they kind of let go all the hard work and consistency that they've had to build over time. Creating your consistent patterns, we all know that's not easy. It's not easy whatsoever. Like it takes time. And that's kind of the hard part, right? Is the time involved. And so I usually like to encourage my athletes to keep your consistency into, I guess, the winter season. A lot of times that people use like the cold or the dark as the reason why they want to like take a step back for a second. But if really those are your only reasons, like I don't like running in the dark or I don't like running in the cold, I just don't feel like those are adequate reasons to really let go of all the consistency that you've built. I have in the notes, and I don't know that it pertains to this conversation necessarily, but we talk a lot about acclimating to the heat and whatnot in the spring. Like we talk about getting out there, we talk about running at different times of the day, what your body, we spend a lot of time discussing blood volume, like all this kind of stuff. And I know that becomes less of an issue in the winter time, right? Because we're not heat training at that time. But I really do think that there's something about acclimating to the heat and acclimating maybe to like less daylight or whatever it is, even if it's a mental kind of thing that we're acclimating to, but it's still very important. And so just encouraging, don't just stop. You want to take a step back, that's fine. You're used to running 60 minutes a day, that's fine. Maybe we keep it down to like 30 or 40 minutes a day, right? We took that step back, we decreased our volume, but you keep your consistency, you acclimate to whatever external factor bothers you, right? You get used to it, so to speak. And then you keep going so that when you do start your training in the spring, you've got a step above where you were this time last year.
I think that's such an important point, because if we let go completely of the work we've done, it becomes exponentially harder to re-engage with that habit. And this is something that you really said well, Drew. And so when we're dealing with some of these new environmental factors, like it's cold, it's windier, it's darker, just taking a step back and saying, how long can I go out and feel comfortable, rather than saying, I'm not going to run. Embrace that challenge, lean into that challenge, and just do what feels comfortable. And this is something that I've become a really big advocate of, and we've talked a lot about. It's like, if you've got a mileage range on your plan, feel free to lean into that low end of the mileage range. Like, that's still really great training. And if you need to do a few miles less, or you're down to 10 or 20 minutes instead, like that is still good training. That is still a small brick that you can stack in your foundation. Like, you have to give yourself a little grace, because if you push yourself to do all 8 and it becomes a mental challenge to get like that 8 miles done when you could have done 6, and 6 felt good and you felt great at 6, you're creating a challenging association with the work that you're doing. Okay, I'm finishing, but it's a mental battle to finish. Well, if I'm finishing and I'm doing 6 instead, and that feels really good, there's a strong positive association there, which makes it a lot more likely that you're going to get out. And so even if that's 10 minutes, even if it's 5 minutes, like 5 minutes with my headlamp is all that felt good. 1 minute longer would have been just existential dread. Fine, take your 5 minutes and, maybe try 6 the next time. I'm totally cool with that. You are going to get a positive response from me 99 out of 100 times. Like, you're going to get a good response. If maybe your individual circumstances, you have a race coming up, I need to push you more, that might be different. But for 99% of the athletes right now, it's winter, it's about to be winter at least. And, it's important to hold things loosely. I like, really thinking about like this kind of, 6 to 8 weeks between like now and the end of January as like a base building period for a lot of athletes too. Like, we're not doing like a lot of heavy speed work. We're doing a lot of easy running. We're like lowering the barrier to entry, but we're still maintaining adaptation. We're still building, aerobic adaptation, provoking aerobic adaptation. and things are going to just feel easier. I know a lot in my own journey, I've noticed a lot of times like this time of year, just like stopping an easy run to go do my hills can sometimes feel challenging because it'll take me a little while to get into like a good running rhythm. I'm adjusting to the cold, I'm adjusting to the light. I respond a lot to like whether it's a blue sky or a gray sky. And so like adjusting to that, and I don't like to stop to do the hills. So like my coach will just work in strides, and like if I feel any niggles, I won't do the strides because strides are much more risky. They're not on a hill, there's more impact forces. So like making small micro adjustments can be very, very helpful. Yeah, Kristen, what was your comment there in the log? I would love to just talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I think that, you know, as we're talking about like daylight savings time and like it's getting colder, it's harder to motivate to get out the door. A lot of times when I see this happening with athletes, I like to, I'm a big fan of alarms and timers, like snack alarms, like all about them. But I'm also a fan of like run alarms. So if it's hard to motivate to get out the door, you know, and you've got, I don't know, like I like switching over to time-based running in the winter because I think that's easier to motivate for. It's a little less daunting than a 6-mile run, you know, saying like, all right, let's get out for 50 minutes, setting an alarm for half of that time, 25 minutes. And when your alarm goes off, you just turn around and go home. And it can be faster than, you know, the 25 minutes out, or it can be slower than the 25 minutes out. The point is just like getting out, because when you have like the time goal in your mind, it's a lot easier to wrap your head around than a mileage goal. It feels less big. And I've noticed that with some of my athletes that works really well. And they're like, oh my God, that felt so much easier than I thought it was going to be. So if that works for you too, or if you think you want to try that, like talk to your coach. I've personally had like really good experiences with it as well. So that's just one way for me, to motivate, especially when it gets cold, because to Drew's point about acclimating to cold, I'm not a cold, I'm a very fair weather runner. I like being comfortable. Hence like why we're in the desert in the winter. But I think that, you know, there's really something to just getting out the door. So we talk a lot about how mood follows action. And so sometimes just 10 minutes, like give yourself a chance, give yourself 10 minutes, just try it, see how it feels, is way better than just giving up completely.
Yeah, gosh, I think it's so important. And those little perspective shifts that we can have by switching something from mileage to time can be really powerful. And I think more experienced athletes might actually find themselves doing that kind of subconsciously. And that's something that I've actually noticed in my own running. It's like, you know, where do I really feel I'm going to get that aerobic stimulus? Okay, 60 to 70 minutes. Like, and if I feel great, then I'm going to go to 90. And that might be, you know, my 10 or my 12 miles, depending if I'm on road or trail. And it's like, you know, this is something that I've had to do a lot lately with my running, because it's been so up and down. Some days I feel really good and other days I feel really bad. And it's like not fighting those feelings and just being like, you know, I have this mileage on my plan, but that's just a guide, right? Like your coaches give you a guide and a roadmap. We make a decision that reflects where we believe that you are, and one where we, you know, and we create the roadmap for where we want you to go. And so like, if one day doesn't feel 100% and you're like, well, I have 8 to 10 and I just can't do a 90-minute run today. Like that is so mentally hard. I have a million things going on. My head's in a million places. Okay, well, you know, how would it feel to do 50 minutes? How would it feel to do an hour or 40 minutes? And, you know, just having maybe that internal supportive dialogue and not a negative dialogue about it, not one that puts you down, but one that just maybe makes that adjustment, you know. And I know it's easier for athletes who have been running a lot longer to kind of make an adjustment from mileage to time base. And that's something that like probably Drew or me or you, Kristen, or Zoe, or whoever, like we all have been running for so long. We're like, okay, 10-mile run on the roads, that's going to take me 75 minutes. Like, I just know how long it'll take. and other athletes aren't going to know that. And so that's when you just ask your coach, like, hey, like, things are feeling really busy. Like, I would love to do some base building this fall. And like, it would feel a lot better for me if we just, use time as a proxy for volume instead. And it's like, there's no one or the other is better. It's just whatever is better for the individual, right? And that's why we're coaching always to the individual, while our plans are individualized, why we don't give you a cookie cutter thing that you could download off of Google Images. It's like, this is, based on you and your biology and your individual experiences, your age, your background, all of this stuff. And so like, if you feel like time works better for you, like, let's get into time. And I feel like that's super important. And I really like to sometimes oscillate that with my athletes. Like, I'll have athletes who are like really pressured at work. So we'll go to time for a while. And then like, I feel like when we're training for ultras and running on trail, mileage is a better proxy because I want you to spend more time out there. And so miles inevitably are going to force you to be out there longer, especially if we're doing, hills and working in vert, and it's just going to take longer to get to that mileage goal. And so at that moment, maybe, mileage is the better proxy. But there's all these different situations, and so there's not always one right answer. But we can hold all this loosely, and your coaches do too. When we approach your plan, we think about how you're feeling. We think about the feedback that you've given us. It's really detail oriented. It's a lot more than just popping into the log and saying good work today. There's so much more that goes into it. We're kind of running out of time here. I'm not going to try to squeeze in our planning for 2023. It doesn't make sense. But I do want to talk a little bit more about some structure to winter training. I think that it can help athletes maybe start to formulate their plan. And so if we're looking at things in terms of maybe we're building some base right now, we're doing a lot of easy miles, we're doing some maintenance work with some hill strides and fast strides. I usually will have, because good training works in a lot of cycles, after the holidays, when people get done with family obligations and stuff, we often do winter speed work, where we're working on kind of that zone 4, 10K effort. We're pushing, we're stacking some speed breaks. Maybe volume is a little bit lower. We've got some extra space for winter sports, which is cool. But it's important to recognize how your year is structured. And so we start with a base building phase. So, our musculoskeletal system is adapted, it's strong, it's ready for the impact forces of speed work. And then we can layer on that speed, maybe take a little volume off it to keep things balanced. And then from there, we continue to work on those different parts of our aerobic system, right? We might do, I really love threshold building in late winter before spring. We're working on, kind of that race pace, almost a little bit faster than race pace, and just really getting comfortable there. And slowly kind of as we get closer to races, we go closer to the adaptations that are more specific to the events. And so that's all part of your off season, right? That's all part of winter training and just starting. And I want you guys to just start thinking about that. I want to talk more about it. Probably will be the first call in December. And we'll also get to hear from Zoe, Sarah, and Kylie on some of their takeaways and what went well, what didn't go well, what are they working on. These guys are awesome. So I'm really looking forward to hearing their perspectives on it all as well. But thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in. And next week, we're going to have our annual gratitude call. I would encourage everybody to be there. I know it's 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. It could be a tough time for people. But we've done this call. This could be our third or fourth iteration of it. Check out our newsletter, explained a little bit more about why that's important, why we do that. And if you do come to the call, just plan on one expression of gratitude, something that you're taking away from 2022 that you're grateful for. 1 to 2 minutes, doesn't have to be something big. We do this every year. It's super fun. It's really exciting. Hope to see you all there. Have a great weekend, guys. Stay warm. Have fun. Thanks, coaches.